My name is Daniel Mercer. For the past 13 years, I've devoted my life to investigating disappearances connected to a creature known only as Mr. Grins. Most people dismiss the stories as urban legends. I don't. I've seen him. When I was 22 years old, I entered Grinning Pines Forest with 4 friends. We were young, stupid, and convinced we could handle anything waiting for us in those woods. We were wrong. That night, I saw something standing among the trees. Something impossibly tall. Something impossibly thin. Its eyes glowed bright orange in the darkness. A grin stretched across its face from ear to ear, exposing rows of sharp, yellow, rotting teeth. I remember freezing in place as it stared directly at me. Then the screaming started. My friends disappeared that night. I never saw them again. I escaped with a scar across my neck and nightmares that never truly ended. The police found nothing. No bodies, no evidence, no answers. As far as the world was concerned, my friends simply vanished. But I knew the truth. Something was hunting people. Something intelligent. Something patient. Something I would eventually come to know as Mr. Grins. Since that night, I have dedicated my life to documenting every disappearance connected to him, every witness statement, every missing person, every strange sighting, every trail that law enforcement abandoned. Those investigations became known as the Smile Files. And no file has haunted me more than Case File 001. The case of Ethan Harper. Ethan Harper was 8 years old when he disappeared, according to school records, photographs, and statements collected before the family's disappearance. Ethan was an energetic child who loved exploring outdoors. He lived with his father, David Harper, his mother, Emily Harper, and his older sister, Lily Harper. Today, all 4 members of the Harper family are missing. No one remains to tell their story. Everything I know about Ethan comes from recovered records, police reports, school documents, photographs, and evidence left behind. The Harper case began as a simple missing child investigation. At least that's what authorities believed. Ethan vanished without warning. One day, he was there. The next day, he wasn't. Search teams spent weeks combing nearby forests, fields, creeks, and abandoned structures. Nothing was found. No footprints, no clothing, no signs of a struggle. No evidence that Ethan had wandered away. It was as if he had simply ceased to exist. Months later, the case stalled. Authorities exhausted every lead. The investigation slowed. The file gathered dust. That's when I found it. At first, Ethan's disappearance looked similar to hundreds of other missing child cases. Then I noticed something strange. Several reports referenced unusual sightings near the Harper property in the weeks before Ethan vanished. Witnesses described seeing strange orange lights among the trees at night. Most investigators dismissed them as flashlights, vehicle lights, or reflections. I recognized the pattern immediately. Orange eyes. The same detail appeared repeatedly throughout dozens of disappearances connected to Mr. Grins. I requested every document available. Photographs, maps, search records, witness statements, everything. The deeper I dug, the more similarities I found. Every trail pointed toward the same horrifying possibility. Mr. Grins had been watching Ethan. What disturbed me most was the timeline. Evidence suggested the sightings began long before Ethan disappeared. Days, possibly weeks. Mr. Grins wasn't simply taking victims. He was stalking them first, studying them, waiting. I drove to the Harper property shortly after opening the file. The house stood abandoned. Dark windows stared back at me like empty eyes. The surrounding woods seemed unnaturally quiet. No birds, no insects, no movement, just silence. The kind of silence I have learned to fear. I walked the perimeter for hours, documenting every detail. Most of the evidence had already been collected months earlier, but something about the place felt wrong. Like the forest itself was holding its breath. As the sun began to set, I found myself staring into the tree line. A feeling settled into my stomach, the same feeling I experienced 13 years ago in Grinning Pines Forest. The feeling of being watched. I couldn't see anything, but I knew. Somewhere beyond those trees, something was looking back. Something with orange eyes. Something smiling. That evening I returned to my motel room and reviewed Ethan Harper's file for the 100th time. The evidence was incomplete. The answers were missing, but one fact remained undeniable. Ethan Harper was the first known victim in what would become one of the most disturbing family disappearance cases I had ever investigated. At the time, I didn't know the full story. I didn't know what would happen to David, Emily, and Lily Harper. I didn't know how deep this case would go. I only knew one thing. Mr. Grins had chosen Ethan Harper first, and that meant Ethan's file was where the truth had to begin. 3 weeks after opening Ethan Harper's file, I found the first real piece of evidence. For months, local authorities had searched the area surrounding the Harper property and found nothing. No trace of Ethan. No clue where he had gone. No indication whether he was alive or dead. That changed on a cold October morning. I had spent days mapping witness sightings around the Harper cabin. Most investigators searched near the locations where Ethan had last been seen. I was searching for where Mr. Grins wanted me to look. There was a difference. The creature wasn't random. It never had been. Every disappearance I investigated carried signs of planning, patterns, messages. Sometimes evidence appeared exactly where it wanted to be found. I hated that thought, because it meant Mr. Grins wasn't simply hunting. He was playing a game, and I was one of the players. The trail led me nearly 2 miles north of the Harper cabin. The deeper I moved into the forest, the quieter everything became. No birds, no squirrels, no wind, just silence. I reached a clearing shortly before noon. At its center stood a massive dead tree. The trunk was hollow, its bark blackened and cracked as though it had been burned years ago. The moment I saw it, my stomach tightened. Something felt wrong, very wrong. I approached carefully. The smell hit me first. Decay. The scent drifted from the hollow center of the tree. I drew my flashlights and looked inside. What I found there would forever change Ethan Harper's case. At first, I couldn't process what I was seeing. Then reality settled in. A human leg. Small. Far too small. The clothing fragments attached to it matched descriptions from Ethan Harper's missing person report. For several seconds, I simply stood there, frozen. After months of searching, this was the first physical evidence ever recovered. The first proof that Ethan Harper had not simply wandered away. The first proof that something terrible had happened. I forced myself to continue documenting the scene. The injuries immediately stood out. Deep impressions marked the bone and flesh. Bite marks. At least they appear to be. But they didn't resemble any predator I knew. The spacing was wrong. The shape was wrong. Some marks were unnaturally narrow and elongated. Others looked almost human. Almost, but not quite. I had seen photographs like this before. Cases connected to Mr. Grins often contained injuries that defied explanation. Evidence that sat in a place between animal and something far worse. Then I noticed the carving. It covered the bark directly above the hollow opening. Fresh cuts dug deep into the wood. 3 words. I've been waiting. I stared at them for a long time, because they weren't meant for investigators. They weren't meant for police. They were meant for me. Mr. Grins knew I was here. He knew I was searching, and somehow, impossibly, he knew exactly where I would find the evidence. The realization sent a chill through my entire body. For 13 years I had hunted him. Maybe he had been hunting me too. I photographed everything and contacted authorities. The evidence was secured and transported for analysis, but I couldn't leave. Not immediately. Something kept pulling my attention toward the surrounding woods, as if someone stood just beyond the trees, watching, waiting, smiling. That night, I stayed in a motel outside town. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the hollow tree, the carved message, the leg. Around 3 in the morning, exhaustion finally overtook me. That's when the visions began. I found myself standing in a dark forest. The trees stretched endlessly in every direction. Fog drifted between them. Somewhere ahead, a child was crying. "Ethan," I called. The crying stopped. For a moment there was silence. Then I saw him, a small figure standing among the trees. 8 years old, wearing the same clothing shown in his missing person photographs. His back faced me. "Ethan!" I shouted. I started running, but no matter how fast I moved, the distance never changed. The forest seemed to stretch endlessly between us. Then Ethan slowly turned his head. Before I could see his face, another figure emerged behind him. Tall, thin, unnaturally tall. Orange eyes glowed through the darkness. A grin split its face from ear to ear. Mr. Grins. One long hand settled onto Ethan's shoulder. The creature stared directly at me and smiled wider. Then Ethan vanished. The forest vanished. Everything vanished. I woke up gasping for air. My motel room was dark. My heart hammered against my ribs. The digital clock beside the bed read 3:33 a.m. For several moments I couldn't move, because the dream hadn't felt like a dream. It had felt like a message, a warning, or perhaps a promise. When morning arrived, I returned to my investigation notes. One fact could no longer be denied. The evidence recovered from the hollow tree strongly suggested Ethan Harper was dead. Yet his body remained missing. Most of him remained missing. And somehow, Mr. Grins wanted me to know that the creature wasn't hiding the truth anymore. It was revealing it piece by piece, leading me somewhere, showing me only what it wanted me to see. The question that haunted me was simple. Why? Why leave evidence? Why carve a message? Why torment me with visions of Ethan Harper? As I packed my equipment from another day in the woods, I couldn't shake the feeling that the answer was waiting somewhere ahead, and that Mr. Grins was counting on me to keep following the trail. I returned to the hollow tree 3 days later. The authorities had already collected the evidence I discovered, but something about the location continued to bother me. Mr. Grins had left Ethan's leg there for a reason. The message carved into the bark wasn't random. Neither was the location. Everything about the discovery felt deliberate, like a breadcrumb, a piece of a trail, and I intended to follow it. The forest was unusually quiet when I arrived. No birds, no insects, no movement, just the sound of my boots pressing into damp earth. The hollow tree stood exactly where I had left it. The words remained carved into its bark. I've been waiting. Walked around the trunk several times, examining every detail, searching for something I might have overlooked. At first, I found nothing. Then I noticed the ground. A patch of soil near the roots appeared disturbed. Not recently. Old disturbance. Months old. Perhaps even dating back to the original disappearance. I knelt and carefully brushed away leaves and dirt. Beneath them, I discovered something partially buried. A small metal object. After clearing away the soil, I realized what it was. A compass. Old. Scratched. Weathered. I immediately recognized it from one of Ethan Harper's family photographs. The 8-year-old boy had been wearing it around his neck during a camping trip months before he vanished. My heart began to race. This was the first piece of evidence placing Ethan near the hollow tree. And if Ethan had been here, then Mr. Grins had likely brought him here. I photographed the compass before placing it into an evidence bag. As I stood, a sudden wave of dizziness hit me. The forest blurred. For a moment, I thought I might faint. Then I heard a voice. A child's voice. "Dad?" I spun around. Nothing. Only trees. The voice came again. "Dad?" It wasn't Ethan's father. It sounded like Ethan himself. Lost. Confused. Searching. The sound drifted through the woods and disappeared. I told myself it wasn't real, that exhaustion was playing tricks on me. But deep down I knew better. Mr. Grins was near. I could feel it. The same feeling I had experienced 13 years ago in Grinning Pines Forest. The feeling that invisible eyes were fixed upon me, watching every movement. I continued searching. Nearly an hour later I discovered something else. A series of strange markings carved into several nearby trees. Not words, symbols, deep scratches arranged in a pattern. I followed them from tree to tree. Each marking pointed farther into the woods, almost like trail markers. The deeper I followed them, the stronger the feeling became. The sensation of being watched grew overwhelming. Then I found the final tree. Unlike the others, this one contained words, freshly carved. The cuts looked recent, far too recent. The message read, "Stop looking or join them." The air around me suddenly felt cold. My pulse hammered in my ears. I slowly turned. For the briefest moment, I saw him, Mr. Grins, standing between two trees perhaps 50 yards away. Tall, thin, motionless. Orange eyes glowing through the darkness. His grin stretched impossibly wide across his face. I raised the camera. The instant I blinked, he was gone. Nothing remained. No footprints, no movement, no sound. Only empty forest. I should have left. Any reasonable person would have. Instead, I looked back at the warning. Because warnings only matter when someone has something to hide. And for the first time since opening Ethan Harper's file, I felt certain of something. I was getting close. Closer than I had ever been. Mr. Grins wasn't taunting me anymore. He was nervous. The creature that had stalked families for years. The creature responsible for countless disappearances. The creature that had haunted my life since I was 22 years old. It wanted me to stop, which meant I was heading in the right direction. As I packed my equipment and began the long walk back toward my vehicle, I couldn't shake a single thought. The hollow tree had never been the destination. It was only the beginning. Somewhere beyond those woods was the truth about Ethan Harper. And Mr. Grins was becoming desperate enough to reveal himself to keep me from finding it. The warning should have frightened me. It did. But it also confirmed something I had suspected for years. Mr. Grins wasn't an unstoppable force of nature. He made choices. He followed patterns, and patterns could be studied. That was why I returned to the wood the following morning. The compass, the hollow tree, and the warning all pointed to the same conclusion. There was something near the Harper cabin that Mr. Grins didn't want me to find. The question was what? I began retracing every step of my investigation, every location, every piece of evidence, every witness report. Hours passed without progress. By late afternoon, I found myself standing near the hollow tree once again. The forest was silent, the same unnatural silence that seemed to follow every case connected to Mr. Grins. As I turned to leave, something caught my attention. A strip of cloth snagged on a low branch. It wasn't there before. I was certain of it. I carefully removed it and examined the fabric. The material appeared weathered, but recognizable. Another possible piece of Ethan's clothing. Several yards farther ahead, I found another, then another. A trail, not random. Intentional. The pieces formed a path leading south through the woods, toward the Harper cabin. I followed carefully. The trail continued for nearly a mile. Every piece appeared positioned where it could easily be found. Visible, obvious, deliberate. The realization sent a chill through me. Mr. Grins wanted me to follow. The creature wasn't hiding evidence. It was arranging it, presenting it, as if directing an audience through a performance. That observation immediately went into my notes. New behavioral observation, Mr. Grins. Subject appears to intentionally stage evidence. Recovered items are often discovered in highly visible locations rather than concealed areas. Possible explanations: psychological manipulation, desire to guide investigations, desire to control the narrative surrounding victims. Evidence may function as communication rather than concealment. Mr. Grins does not simply take victims. He appears to create trails. The discovery bothered me more than I cared to admit. Predators usually hide evidence. Mr. Grins displayed it, almost proudly. The trail eventually led me back to the Harper cabin. The structure looked even more abandoned than before. The fading daylight cast long shadows across the porch. For several minutes I simply stood there, watching, waiting, listening. Nothing moved. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone stood inside, watching me through the dusty windows. I entered cautiously. The cabin remained empty. Furniture sat untouched beneath layers of dust. Family photographs still decorated the walls. The Harper family frozen in happier times. David, Emily, Lily, Ethan. A family that had no idea what was coming. As I searched the cabin room by room, another pattern began to emerge. Something I had overlooked before. The photographs. Almost every photograph containing Ethan had been disturbed, not removed, not destroyed, moved, tilted slightly, shifted from their original positions. The photographs, featuring only the other family members, remained untouched. I stared at them for several minutes. Then another realization struck me. The first victim wasn't random. Mr. Grins had been focused on Ethan. Long before the rest of the family disappeared, I immediately recorded another observation. New behavioral observation, Mr. Grins. Subject may select a primary target before acting against an entire family unit. Evidence suggests prolonged focus on a single victim. The victim may be observed for weeks or months before disappearance. Other family members may become secondary targets after the initial abduction. This behavior indicates planning rather than opportunistic attacks. The more I learned, the less human the creature seemed. Yet, paradoxically, the behavior appeared increasingly intelligent, calculated, purposeful, almost obsessive. As evening approached, I completed one final sweep of the cabin. That was when I noticed something unusual. A child's drawing pinned beneath a bookshelf. It had fallen where previous investigators likely never noticed it. I carefully pulled it free. The paper had yellowed with age. Across the page was a crude drawing created with crayons. A cabin, trees, a smiling stick figure with orange circles for eyes, and standing beside it, a much smaller figure. A child. At the bottom, written in uneven handwriting, were 4 words. "He keeps watching me." My heart sank. Ethan had seen him, not just once, repeatedly, long before he disappeared. I photographed the drawing and sealed it into an evidence bag. Then I sat alone in the fading light. For the first time since opening the case, I felt as though I was beginning to understand how Mr. Grins operated. Not what he was, not where he came from, but how he hunted. He watched, he studied, he selected, he stalked. And then, when the victim finally vanished, he left behind pieces of the story. Pieces he wanted someone to find. Pieces he wanted me to find. As darkness settled over the cabin, I closed my notebook. The file on Mr. Grins had grown larger that day, but so had my unease, because every new discovery pointed toward a terrifying possibility. Mr. Grins wasn't merely hunting victims, he was documenting them, and somehow Ethan Harper had become one of his most important stories. I had a feeling the next clue would bring me closer than ever to discovering why. I returned to the Harper cabin one final time. At least, that's what I thought. The previous discoveries had left me with more questions than answers. Ethan Harper's compass, the clothing trail, the drawing hidden beneath the bookshelf, the evidence recovered from the hollow tree. Everything pointed back to the cabin. Everything. The realization haunted me for days. I had searched the cabin multiple times. So had local authorities. If there was something hidden there, why hadn't anyone found it? The answer came unexpectedly. A heavy storm rolled through the area the night before my return. Rain soaked the ground and strong winds shook the forest. When I arrived the following morning, I immediately noticed something strange beneath the cabin. The soil had been disturbed, freshly disturbed. I froze. The dirt wasn't like the surrounding earth. It appeared recently turned over, despite weeks of weather and abandonment. Someone or something had been here. Recently. My pulse quickened as I knelt beside the crawlspace opening. The disturbed ground led directly underneath the cabin. For a moment, I simply stared. Then I grabbed my flashlight and crawled inside. The space beneath the cabin was dark and cramped. Dust coated the support beams. Spiderwebs hung from the floorboards above. The deeper I moved, the stronger a feeling settled in my chest. Not fear, dread, because I already knew what I was going to find. Near the center of the crawl space, the disturbed soil ended. There, partially concealed beneath loose earth, were Ethan Harper's remains. I stopped moving, stopped breathing. For years, Ethan had been missing. For years, investigators had searched forests, rivers, abandoned buildings, and miles of wilderness. Yet somehow, he had ended up beneath the cabin. The very place everyone had already examined. The very place that should have been discovered long ago. It didn't make sense. Nothing about it made sense. The evidence suggested the remains had not been there during the original searches. The soil was too fresh, the disturbance too recent. Someone had placed Ethan there after the investigation began, after the searches, after the discovery of the hollow tree, after my involvement. That realization chilled me more than the discovery itself. Mr. Grins hadn't merely taken Ethan. he had returned him, or at least part of the truth. I documented everything, and immediately contacted authorities. Hours later, the area was secured and processed. The official investigation would eventually confirm what I had already known. Why lead me directly to him? And perhaps most disturbing of all, why did it feel as though Mr. Grins wanted Ethan to be found? The creature had spent months hiding the truth, then suddenly began revealing it piece by piece, almost as if Ethan's discovery was part of a larger plan, a plan I couldn't yet see. As investigators worked outside, I sat alone inside the cabin and opened my notebook. For several minutes, I stared at the file. The first file. The one that started everything. Then I wrote the final entry. Case file 001. Ethan Harper. Status: closed. Victim: Ethan Harper. Age: 8. Date of disappearance: unknown. Date of recovery: recorded in investigative log. Location of recovery: beneath Harper family cabin. Cause of death: undetermined. Primary suspect: Mr. Grins. Case outcome: victim recovered. Investigation concluded. Additions to the Mr. Grins behavioral profile. Observation 01. Subject stalks victims for extended periods before disappearance. Observation 02. Subject appears capable of monitoring investigators. Observation 03. Subject deliberately stages evidence to be discovered. Observation 04. Subject communicates through carved messages and symbolic placement of objects. Observation 05. Subject may psychologically manipulate investigators through visions, dreams, or unexplained experiences. Observation 06. Subject appears to return evidence or remains long after disappearances occur. Observation 07. Subject demonstrates a desire to control how victims are discovered. I closed the notebook. Ethan Harper's story had reached its end, but the Harper family story had not. David Harper was still missing. Emily Harper was still missing. Lily Harper was still missing. 3 files remained unopened. 3 disappearances remained unexplained. And somewhere beyond the trees surrounding the cabin, I knew Mr. Grins was still watching, waiting, smiling. Case file 001 was closed. The real investigation was only beginning.
Thank you for joining me for the Grinning Files. Case file 001. Ethan Harper. After years of mystery, Ethan's file has finally been closed. But while some questions have been answered, many more remain hidden in the darkness. The Harper family story is far from over, and somewhere beyond the trees, Mr. Grins is still waiting. The next file is about to be opened. Case file 002. David Harper. What happened to Ethan's father after his son's disappearance? What secrets remain buried within the Harper family's tragic history? And how deep does Mr. Grins' influence truly go? Stay tuned as we continue the investigation and uncover the truth, one case at a time. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this video with fellow fans of horror, mysteries, and the unexplained. Your support helps these investigations continue. Until next time, keep the lights on, watch the shadows, and remember, if you see orange eyes staring back from the darkness, don't smile back. This has been the Crooked Narrator.